bright day with some patchy cloud in the west at times, highs of 8 Celsius.
After a cold start across northeast England, it'll be dry and bright with plenty of sunshine, feeling a touch cooler than yesterday, high of around 7 Celsius.
A dry and fine morning across southern Scotland with plenty of sunshine and some patchy cloud, windier and cloudier further north with a chance of patchy rain in the west.
In Northern Ireland, cold and frosty start, mist and fog. That will lift though throughout the morning to leave a dry and bright day with plenty of sunshine. And also plenty of sunshine this afternoon, though mist and fog will readily form across England and Wales this evening. And there you go. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day on this Monday. Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. This is, of course, To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. She's back.
Yeah, good to be back.
She's back. We're on your TV and we're on your radio. We've got loads for you today. Prince Harry has thrown his toys out the pram again. Boris Johnson apparently sending in the Navy to the Channel to deal with that migrant crisis.
Yes, and should Keir Starmer step down after allegedly breaking COVID rules? And should the BBC licence fee be abolished? Well, we'll be talking about all that and get in touch with your views as well. We'll read them out throughout the programme, as usual, on GB Views, GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'm a bit rusty.
That's all right, you'll get back into it.
Here's the latest news first, though.
A very good morning. It is 10:02. I'm Rosie Wright here on GB News. Let's get you up to date. 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of the investigation into the Texas Synagogue attack. Malik Fazal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville were unharmed. President Biden said it was an act of terror.
I also told him that I wanted to make sure we got the word out to synagogues and places of worship that we're not going to tolerate this, that we have this capacity to deal with assault on particularly the anti-Semitism that has grown up.
The Prime Minister has reportedly been interviewed by Sue Gray as part of the investigation into Partygate allegations. Well, The Telegraph says Boris Johnson has shared what he knows with the senior civil servant as she prepares to publish her report into number 10 coronavirus rule-breaking as soon as this week. Ms Gray is looking into several possible events, including that Bring Your Own Booze garden party in May of 2020. Labour's Shadow Secretary, Lucy Powell, defended the party's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, on GB News after a photograph emerged of him drinking with staff in a constituency office last year.
I don't think you can compare that in any way at all from the industrial scale, the wide culture of regularly and in a preemptive way, with invites, with trestle tables being put out, with wine fridges being stocked up, the industrial scale of partying gatherings that we saw, that we've seen through in Downing Street, and also the cover-up and lies that we've seen subsequently.
40,000 16 and 17-year-olds in England are now able to get their COVID booster jabs. Also, clinically vulnerable 12 to 15-year-olds who are most at risk from coronavirus can also get their third jab. And a significant rule change for those who test positive for COVID-19 in England from today. The self-isolation period has been cut from a minimum of 7 days to 5 full days, as long as people test negative on days 5 and 6. Spectators in Scotland are now allowed back into the stands for large outdoor public events. Fans can now visit football and rugby matches as COVID restrictions are relaxed. The rules have been put in place on Boxing Day to limit the number of people who can attend to a maximum of 500. Well, currently, restrictions on indoor sports events are still in place in Scotland. The energy price cap could rise by more than 50% this April to around £2,000 per year. That's an average increase of £700 a year for every household. The analysis from the Resolution Foundation think tank says the number of families spending at least 10% of their budgets on energy bills could triple as a result. Ofgem will announce the new price cap level in February, which comes into effect in April. The tennis star Novak Djokovic could return to Australia sooner than anticipated, despite an automatic 3-year ban from entering the country. The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, hinted that Djokovic may be able to compete at next year's Australian Open. He said, "There is the opportunity to return in the right circumstances." The Australian Open gets underway today without the reigning champion following Djokovic's deportation from the country. In international news now, New Zealand has sent a surveillance plane to Tonga to assess the damage following an underwater volcano eruption last weekend. New Zealand also planned to send essential supplies, including drinking water, to the affected areas. The eruption, which triggered a tsunami, has blanketed the Pacific Islands in ash, cut power and severed communications. Katie Greenwood from International Federation of Red Cross spoke to GB News. She says around 80,000 people are affected.
The majority of the population in Tonga relies on rainwater for their drinking water and for their water usage. And so that ashfall really is a significant disturbance for clean drinking water and for hygiene and health needs in the country. The relief response will be making sure that people have access to water purification technology and implements.
The Culture Secretary has indicated the BBC licence fee will be axed. In a tweet, Nadine Dorris said the next announcement about the licence fee is set to be the last. The yearly payment is expected to be kept at the current rate of £159 a year until April 2024. You are up to date now here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's go to the Point with Patrick and Mercy.
Well, good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on TV and radio. We've got a show full of today's big stories and discussion as well on issues you care about at home. So here's what's on the menu.
Yes, and for the first time in history, the UK Border Force will be placed under a military chain of command as part of the government's attempts to stop these boat crossings across the Channel. We'll be without Mehmet, a former diplomat and chairman of Migration Watch UK, to discuss these new plans.
Yes, and Prince Harry is back in the spotlight and is at loggerheads with the Home Office, who have refused his request to have UK police protection when he comes back into the country. That's despite the Prince saying he would pay for it himself. So do you think it's the right move by the Home Office? Get in touch and let us know.
Yes, indeed. And figures have revealed that lockdown led to millions more Brits drinking much, much more. According to experts, 2 million more people are drinking unhealthy amounts of alcohol compared to before the pandemic. We'll be joined by the CEO of an addiction recovery organisation to discuss that.
Yes, that's all coming up across the next couple of hours and much more as well. So get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, before we take your views on it, Patrick gives his view on the latest in the Prince Harry saga.
The artist formerly known as Prince Harry is yet again proving what a self-entitled, self-obsessed, tone-deaf national annoyance he really is. He is threatening to take the UK government to court for refusing to allow him to personally pay for police protection whilst he's in the country. I have a few points on this. Firstly, our Met Police cannot be for hire. Harry is now just a Hollywood celebrity, and if the government allows him to pay for police protection, then every single Hollywood star who comes to Britain will expect the same treatment. Would you want to divert police officers away from a stabbing in order to shield George Clooney from the paps? No. So Harry has to realise he's now in the same boat. If he wanted to keep his police protection, he shouldn't have stuck 2 fingers up to the royal family and legged it off to America to cry into Oprah's bosom. He's simply not entitled to police protection, but of course, the word entitled is something that describes Harry quite well. If he really wanted his family to step up and organise police protection for him, he could have done the dignified thing and attempted to get it sorted behind the scenes. I feel the fact that he's potentially going to take this government to court implies 2 things. Firstly, that he's burnt every single bridge with his family so badly that there is no line of communication behind the scenes anymore. Secondly, that he deliberately wanted to make this as public as possible, so it suits his narrative of the hard-done-by little prince whose family have disowned him and left him to fend for himself, with only his trust fund for support. But more than this, if I wanted to see my elderly grandmother and introduce her to my newborn daughter and allow her to spend time with her great-grandson, I'd just make sure it happened. Conceivably, all Harry would have to do is get on a plane, get private security to take him from the airport to Windsor Castle or to wherever the Queen is, and then stay within its walls for a few days. Then get private security to take him back to the airport, and back he goes to Oprah's bosom. It's as simple as that. Harry and Meghan claimed that they named Lilibet as an affectionate nod to the Queen. Well, they have a funny way of showing affection then, don't they? Because in the last days of Prince Philip's life, Meghan and Harry decided to go on international television and hammer his family, tarnish their reputation and heap misery on our poor Queen. This is Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee year. There will be celebrations throughout the year. And these are now set to be overshadowed by Harry's tell-all book that's due out this upcoming winter. Would you do that to your grandmother? A grandmother who's just suffered the loss of her beloved husband, who will be reeling from having to excommunicate her favourite son from the family, and who's recently recovered from illness herself. If Harry and Meghan really just wanted to come back to the UK to introduce the Queen to her great-grandchild, then they could do that very easily. But I suspect what they also want to do while they're over here is make some appearances with some charities so they can offer wishy-washy platitudes towards abused women, give their toe-curling and hypocritical support for some kind of tree-planting commune, or write a message in felt tip on a wall in Lambeth devoted to the plight of the Native American people. Well, if that's what they need protection for, then we certainly shouldn't be diverting our Met Police away from tackling knife crime, domestic abuse, terrorism and drug dealing, so that these 2 can do a publicity tour of our capital. Prince Harry has told us his truth. Well, maybe now it's time for him to hear some home truths. I think the vast majority of the British public would be perfectly happy, Harry, if you never set foot in this country again.
I think it's quite convenient that we're now talking about this, other than the Prince Andrew. Call me a cynic, but perhaps they're all in it together, and they're trying to change what's on the headlines.
Wow, you took your tinfoil hat off long enough to give us that. No, hey, you never know, do you? It's an interesting diversion tactic, I suppose.
Yes,
it could be.
I think it is. We'll be getting your views about this and everything else, of course, as usual throughout the programme. But joining us now to actually give us some royal insight, probably more sophisticated royal insight than mine, is Angela Levin.
You're going to go at me then. No, you carry on. It's all right.
Royal biographer and author of Harry, a biography of a Prince. Thank you for joining us this morning. So what do you make of all this? He's offered to pay for it himself. So some people are saying, well, what's the big issue?
Well, it's not a case of him paying for it himself, because every superstar can then say the same, and any businessman who's got a load of money can do that. It's nothing to do with that, actually. It's to do with that you can't let American safety people in here and give them all the information from MI5 and MI6, which is what Harry wants. And that's why he wants a metropolitan police escort 24 hours a day. It's not just to take him to and from anywhere. He wants it round the clock. And it just can't be done. I mean, American security guards aren't allowed in any palace. They'd have to have a thorough investigation by the royal family. And also, they're not allowed to have any guns. So if they come off the plane with some guns, they'd be taken away straight away. So it's not a case of money. It's a case of practicality. And it's nothing to do with Buckingham Palace. It's all to do with the Home Office. So that's that.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to get this point in, really, because conceivably, all Harry would have to do is get off a plane, right, land here, have some British-based private security, of which there are many firms, and many of them employ ex-Met police officers, ex-SAS, all these people, drive him to, say, Windsor Castle, and just stay there within the walls for a few days, wouldn't he? I mean, because then he'd be surrounded by the protection of the Queen.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, because I think they want to come desperately to get a lot of stuff to supply to Netflix, so they've got things to say. It's now 2 years and they've been out of touch, and it's a very different world that they're living in, and they need to sort of mug up on what's going on. But the other side of this story is the emotional one, which is equally, if not more important, that they say that they believe that the campaign, that everybody should show more compassion for, in quotes, those they know and those they don't know. But this is a sign of absolutely the opposite of compassion about his grandmother of 95. I suspect, and I haven't got any evidence for this, but this is my own feeling, that Harry is nothing to do with the guy I knew and spent over a year with, who was charming and funny and intuitive and great company. This is a very bitter, unhappy person, and he wants to get revenge on the royal family for his unhappiness, and I think for making the mistake of leaving in such a sort of determined, sudden way. And I think that Meghan never wants to come back here because she hated the country and she hated being a member of the royal family. And she's not someone who wants to take sixth position. Harry's sixth in line to the throne. She didn't like that. She wants to be out there in front. So she doesn't want to come. Now, the question is, will Harry come on his own for the Platinum Jubilee next spring? And this is a great excuse not to come. And it's also blackmail, because he's saying, if you don't give me this, I'm not going to come and show you my children. Well, you know, that's too much to ask. It's just not on, Harry. You can't have both. You can't have his cake and eat it.
No, we can't.
Absolutely not. Well, Angela, thank you so much for talking us through that. Angela Levin, their royal biographer, and author as well of Harry, a biography of a prince. Obviously not a great time for the Queen, is it really? I mean, some of the men in her family definitely giving her a headache recently. So, you know.
Yes, not a great time. But that just emphasises, doesn't it, what, in my opinion anyway, Harry and Meghan are doing here. You know, if you look around, at the end of the day, family is family, or at least that's my attitude to it. And if you have got a grandmother there who's been ill herself, obviously what's going on with Prince Andrew, not ideal to say the least. He's also kind of rejected the royal family recently. It's her Platinum Jubilee. This is bad form, I think, really. But anyway, Dan's been in touch. Go to some of your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Loads of people getting in touch. He wants his bread buttered on both sides. He rejected his royal obligations, still thinks he should have all the privilege. Our police service is not for hire.
Yeah, it's about that precedent, isn't it, really? Yeah. Because, as you mentioned, well, if we do it for him as a private citizen, then surely that opens the door for any private citizen to be able to hire UK policemen and women.
Exactly. And it's also not just a question of whether or not Prince Harry can afford it and whether or not they get given to it. Well, how do you justify, then, a teenager gets stabbed in Camden and actually some police resources, just any police resources, were diverted so that Harry and Meghan could I don't know, go and open a town hall in Slough somewhere or something like that. I mean, it's not particularly ideal, is it?
Yeah.
And that's what Leslie said as well.
Well,
the
yeah, he has actually sought that judicial review now of that Home Office decision. So I suppose we'll have a final. He'll have a final answer shortly, I suppose. But I can't see them giving him what he wants.
Do you not think it fits the narrative? Do you not think we might see this on a Netflix documentary about Prince Harry desperately wrestling with the idea of him trying to bring his children to go and meet the Queen and the royal family getting in the way and this flipping country, you know?
Yeah, they do want to they always seem to want to make villains out of everybody else, really, isn't there? Whether it's the press, which, you know, has been harsh on them a lot of the time, rightly so, some would say, and now, of course, the Home Office. So I think it is very much in their interest to look like the heroes and not the villains. But after the break, we'll give you the latest on Partygate, including sneaky photos of Sir Keir Starmer also enjoying a few lockdown beers. Well, we'll give you that after the weather.
Well, looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking cold to start, but plenty of fine and dry weather for most. So let's take a look at the details.
Across the southwest, any early mist and fog patches will clear this morning, leaving a fine and dry day, feeling cooler than yesterday with a high of around 10 Celsius.
Cold this morning in southeast England with some isolated mist and fog at first. This will clear to leave a dry and fine day.
Chilly this morning for Wales, though there will be plenty of sunshine, so very little cloud cover, cooler day than yesterday, a high around 9 Celsius.
It's a cold start to Monday across the Midlands, though it'll be a fine, dry and bright day with some patchy cloud in the west at times, highs of 8 Celsius.
After a cold start across northeast England, it'll be dry and bright with plenty of sunshine, feeling a touch cooler than yesterday, high of around 7 Celsius.
A dry and fine morning across southern Scotland with plenty of sunshine and some patchy cloud, windier and cloudier further north with a chance of patchy rain in the west.
In Northern Ireland, cold and frosty start, mist and fog. That will lift though throughout the morning to leave a dry and bright day with plenty of sunshine. And also plenty of sunshine this afternoon, though mist and fog will readily form across England and Wales this evening. And there you go. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day on this Monday. Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, morning everybody. It's 10:22 a.m. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki right here on GB News. And of course, we're live on your TV and indeed your radio this morning.
Yes, well, let's go to that top story. The Prime Minister is expected to commence what's being called Operation Red Meat, which is a term I hate. Yeah. Some are saying this is to distract voters from the Partygate scandal and win back their trust. Operation Red Meat includes sweeping new measures such as a booze ban in number 10, a freeze on the BBC licence fee and a pledge to bring in the military to combat the migration crisis.
Yeah, well, there we go. You can see some of those flashing up on your screen right now, as Mercy's just alluded to. Clearly, this is almost like a mini manifesto, isn't it, I think, to try and distract from what's been going on and potentially as well, of course, to try to position Boris Johnson as being slightly more centre-right or right-wing or conservative, dare I say, than what he's actually acted like in recent times. But at the same time, of course, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, there he is, look at him, enjoying himself, is facing calls to apologise after he was pictured drinking a beer with Labour staff indoors in April. So Deputy Leader Angela Rayner said that there is a pattern of lying and holding the British public in contempt. But is she just talking about Boris, or can the same be said for Westminster as a whole, and indeed Sir Keir?
Yes, well, David John Mellor, QC, is the former Tory party MP for Putney who served in the cabinet of Prime Minister John Major as Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Secretary of State for National Heritage as well. Thank you for your time this morning. What do you make of all of this whole Partygate? Is it going to damage Boris Johnson's, or has it done damage to Boris Johnson that can't be undone, shall we say?
It's damaged him very badly. I mean, Partygate shows, I'm afraid, why Boris Johnson was always rather unsuited to be Prime Minister, because he doesn't respect the truth, even on small things. And everything that he's said about these parties, which otherwise, shouldn't matter at all, has not been true. And the truth has had to be sort of squeezed out of him as he is faced with incontrovertible facts. I think the problem also with Boris Johnson is, number 10 Downing Street takes on the image of the person who is the leader. I was a minister for 9 years under Margaret Thatcher and then a few more years under John Major. Margaret Thatcher would not have allowed people to go out and wheel back cases full of booze from the local supermarket. It was a place of work, genuine work. And I think the problem for Boris is he runs a not very tight ship. And a lot of the people who surround him are really too immature to cover up the problems that Boris Johnson has in working hard enough and in defining what he wants his government to do. I mean, I think it's faintly amusing. I can understand
that, just to get involved.
There he is out there doing a lot of stuff on, for instance, people crossing the Channel. Why didn't he do that 2 years ago? Why didn't he? Just because we're going to come on to that.
Yeah, just because we're going to come on to the Channel stuff. So just for focusing on Partygate quickly now. What I don't understand as well is the Met Police involvement in this. You don't wheel a suitcase full of anything into Downing Street without someone checking what's inside it, surely.
Yes,
and
exactly.
if you do, then that's a massive problem. So the Met Police are involved by definition. And we've seen Keir Starmer, who it's important to say, well, I don't know if it's that important, but he says anyway, he was working in the office and he stopped for something to drink. There's a video of it. It looks to me a lot like him drinking in an office with people, which is essentially what Boris Johnson was accused of doing. The media were very slow to react on this. I spoke about this video 2 weeks ago, and all of us, no, we're not having it, no. Well, is there a media bias here? Is this trial by media for Boris Johnson, do you think?
Of course, it's always been trial by media in politics. But I think, you see, my point is this. Because people are getting sick of the manner in which Boris runs his government, they seize upon these parties. But the parties themselves don't actually matter very much. What matters is whether Boris Johnson is capable of being Prime Minister. There was an interesting comment, I think it was in the Sunday Times yesterday, one of the main papers, where a close colleague, a fellow cabinet minister, would say, Boris is so worried he's actually now reading his papers, i.e. his official papers. Well, why isn't he reading his official papers all the time? Margaret Thatcher used to read 3 or 4 boxes of official documents every night. The problem with Boris is he is not cut out to be Prime Minister. And really, what this business about the parties merely illustrates that. But, for me, one of the reasons why the Tory party need to sort out Boris now is because of what's coming up with 7% inflation, with a burden of taxation, the highest in 70 years, with a whole lot of economic bad news. And the question that has to be asked is Boris capable of getting to grips with the economy? And I think the answer to that is no, because Boris doesn't approach things the way that a proper Conservative would, which is to actually deal with the issues of public expenditure by keeping public expenditure under control.
Can I just ask you then, if not Boris, who? Because there are 54 letters that would be needed to go to the backbench committee of the Conservative Party, the 1922, to trigger that leadership election. If we did see a leadership election, who would you like to see, on that ballot paper? Because there's only really Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, really, isn't there?
Well, mercifully, I don't have to make that decision. I'm simply concerned with whether Boris Johnson is a suitable leader for this country. And I don't think.
Do you think there is a suitable leader amongst the ranks of the current Conservative Party then?
Well, one of the problems that Boris has, or rather one of the problems he's created for the rest of us, is that this is not a particularly strong government. The people he's put into government are not necessarily the best and the brightest of those who could be available. There are, chairmen of select committees. I don't know, Tom Tugendhat, for instance, who would be a far better minister than some of those that are in. But I just don't think people should confuse themselves too much about, successors have a habit of popping up. The question.
Well, yeah, but that's. I'm sorry, but that's the kind of slapdash approach to this country that you're accusing Boris Johnson of taking. It's all very well and good saying he's not good enough to lead the country. It's all very well and good, and you may well be right. I'm not necessarily sitting here disputing that, but you can't say, right, well, let's get rid of this guy and hope somebody else pops up.
Well, there are plenty of people who would stand, but the point is, every leader has an opportunity to get a following from the British people, and every leader has an opportunity to lose that. I was asked the other day in the Daily Telegraph, and I wrote a piece about what does the fall of John Major tell us about the potential fall of Boris Johnson. John Major was the man for the moment in 1992 when he seemed better than Neil Kinnock. Later on, when Tony Blair emerged, John Major seemed too dull and grey to be able to combat Labour. Boris Johnson was the sort of rock star who could take the Conservatives to a majority of 80, which probably no one else could have done 2 years ago. But Boris Johnson doesn't now seem to be the man who can define the goals of his government and behave in a way that makes people proud to be Conservative supporters. You've just got to look at the terrible opinion polls, 70% of people not believing he tells the truth. Yeah, we've all been through this. There's nothing new under the sun. You just got to look back into political history. Harold Wilson was regarded as a congenital liar, and people used to laugh at him. People would say, well, how can you tell when Harold Wilson is lying? And the answer is his lips move. Once a prime minister becomes a laughing stock, then it's all over. And the danger for Boris is that he's becoming a laughing stock.
And one of the reasons he is perhaps becoming a laughing stock, and the government as a whole, is how they've handled the migration crisis. We know last year we saw a record number of crossings across the Channel, and now the papers are reporting in the Times this morning, it says Boris will put the military in charge. He's asking the Royal Navy to take primacy and over all government vessels in the Channel from this month. Do you think that's the right way to go about this? And do you think that that's a policy of substance, or is he just actually trying to distract everybody from what's going on in his own office?
Well, I was a Home Office Minister for 5 years, so I know a bit about this. And to my mind, based on my experience, of course, it's...
Oh, we'll never know. We'll never know. Well, we'll maybe get him back on. He's back, is he? He's back. Apparently, we're getting shouted at. Apparently, hey, here he is.
Hi.
Right, you got.
I'm the Boris Johnson of interviews, Yeah. So basically,
in your experience,
introducing the armed forces into this, they can't jeopardize the lives of these unfortunate people who are trying to get across the Channel. So what can they do? It's a gimmick. But the problem is, with a Home Secretary like Priti Patel, who the day she was appointed, I said she doesn't have the substance to be Home Secretary, and a Prime Minister with as spurious a thought process as Boris, people will think, oh, we're getting a Navy and that'll be great. But it won't be. Why haven't they thought the policy out in the 2 years they've been in office? That's the question. Why are they just dragging some tuppenny halfpenny soundbite out when Boris is in deep political trouble? He doesn't really. Margaret Thatcher spent her whole life, and as I say, I was a minister of hers for 9 years, spent her whole life. She was a difficult woman to work for, but she spent her whole life fretting about what she could do to make the situation better.
All right,
I don't think
sorry to
Boris
cut you
does
off.
that.
Sorry to cut you off mid Thatcher, but thank you very much, David. Great to have you on the show. David Miller, there, former Conservative MP for Putney. Thank you very much. Well, we have got to go over to your headlines, but after the break anyway. The man who held worshippers at a synagogue in Texas hostage was actually a British national. What does this mean for anti-Semitism in the UK? What's the biggest story there as well? But before that, it is a look at this morning's news.
A very good morning. It is 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright here on GB News. Let's get you up to date. 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of the investigation into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by the FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages were held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. They were all unharmed. 40,000 16 and 17-year-olds in England are now able to get their COVID booster jabs. Also, clinically vulnerable 12 to 15-year-olds who are most at risk from coronavirus are also able to get their 3rd injection. And a significant rule change for those who test positive for COVID-19 in England. From today, the self-isolation period has been cut from a minimum of 7 days to 5 full days, as long as people test negative on days 5 and 6. The tennis star Novak Djokovic could return to Australia sooner than anticipated, despite an automatic 3-year ban from entering the country. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison hinted that Djokovic might be able to compete at next year's Australian Open. He says there is the opportunity to return in the right circumstances, which will be considered at the time. The Australian Open gets underway today without the reigning champion following his deportation from the country. An 18-year-old from Bracknell has been reported missing after not returning from a night out on Saturday. Marnie Clayton was last seen leaving Atik nightclub in Windsor at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. She's approximately 5 foot 3 inches tall with brown hair, a slim build, and she was wearing a grey-coloured dress. The Times says Boris Johnson is putting the military in charge of stemming Channel migrant crossings as part of an attempt to save his premiership. Asked about the reports, the Education Secretary Naheem Sahawi said a coordinated operation involving naval vessels and border force with a single command and control is a good idea. You are up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly after a break, we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning. It's just going 10:38 and you're watching To The Point with Patrick and me, Mercy Muroki, on GB News. And you might also be listening to us because,
Yes.
of course, we are now on radio as well.
Yes, well, the man who held worshippers hostage at a synagogue in Texas before he was shot dead by police has been identified as 44-year-old British Muslim Malik Faisal Akram.
Yes, the suspect attacked congregation Beth Israel Synagogue in Colleyville near Dallas on Saturday, and he died after a 10-hour standoff with police. The 4 hostages he took were fortunately released unharmed.
Yes, indeed. Well, we are joined now by Mark White, who's our home and security editor, and he has the very latest on this. So, Mark, just fill us in, please.
Yeah, overnight we got news of 2 teenagers who have been arrested in connection with the incident that unfolded in the suburb of Colleyville, which is near Dallas-Fort Worth, on Saturday. Now, these 2 individuals are being held by counter-terrorism detectives and are being questioned. This is not unusual in the aftermath of any terrorist incident. We will often see family, friends, associates of an individual who are contacted and often arrested by the police, taken in for questioning, and then at some point, most of them are usually then ruled out of ongoing investigations. Not to say these 2 will be ruled out. We don't know what the connection is here, but just to give you an idea of how these investigations progress. Now, this incident itself, as I say, it happened in this relatively small town, about 25,000 population. This 44-year-old went into the synagogue about 11 a.m. in the morning as the service was underway, apparently told them that he was a homeless person. They let him inside, and then he proceeded to take a number of people hostage, 4 people, including the rabbi. After about 6 hours, 1 of the hostages was let go. Then, a while later, we're told that he became increasingly belligerent, was deemed to be a very significant risk to life, that he may be about to take lives, and police, FBI, tactical teams intervened at that time and shot him dead. All the hostages, thankfully, were released unharmed.
Do we know, whether he travelled to America specifically for this? Has he been living there? Have any of those sorts of details started to emerge?
Well, we know that he travelled to America recently. He landed in New York just 2 weeks ago, and according to security officials over there, he bought weapons soon after. Now, whether he had intended to target this particular synagogue, whether he was looking for something in that area, we don't know. We know that during demands that were made, that this was being live streamed for a while, actually, over the internet, and you could hear him shouting in the background. He was calling for the release of a woman called Afia Siddiqui, a Pakistani neuroscientist who was arrested 15 years ago in Afghanistan on suspicion of being involved in al-Qaeda-related terrorist activity. During that arrest and questioning process, she grabbed a gun and tried to shoot the officials from the army that were holding her and questioning her at that time. She's now serving an 86-year jail term. She's become a bit of a cause célèbre, though, in jihadi circles. They have been calling for her to be released for some time. Never going to happen, of course. No. But when James Foley, you remember the journalist who was kidnapped by the Islamic State in Syria, was being held, and there were some brief negotiations. They were calling for the release of Afia Siddiqui. Of course, that never happened. James Foley was murdered by those terrorists after a while.
Yeah, no, I understand that this individual's family were involved in the liaison as well to try to get him out and get the hostages out, I understand.
Yes, it's been confirmed by this man's brother, Gulber, who has been talking to various members of the local media up in the Greater Manchester area, and they said that he was involved for a while, but there was nothing that he could really do, that he claims his brother was mentally disturbed, had been mentally disturbed for some time. Whether that's true or not, I mean, it may be true. What we often see, of course, with terror-related incidents is that groups like Islamic State will often go after the vulnerable. So it will often be people that are easily manipulated or susceptible to being, guided in a certain direction. And it can, sadly, sometimes be people that have mental health issues. So there may be an element of truth to that. But Goldberry's brother, as I say, has been cooperating with the police. He posted on a local Muslim website up in the Blackburn area that he was very sorry for what had happened and for the people that were targeted.
Well, Mark White, thank you for bringing us that update. I'm sure you'll bring us any further updates we get on that issue. Now, something a bit lighter, I think.
Absolutely. We've had a relatively heavy start, haven't we? We've had Prince Harry, we've had Partygate, we've had Keir Starmer, we've had what's going on in the Channel, we've had terrorism. Well, it's something a bit different now.
Yes, seals.
Seals?
Not Navy seals.
No.
An actual seal. A wandering seal led police in England on a low-speed pursuit through Grimsby, of all places.
Yeah, as if you're going to see like one of those things on like traffic cops. There's a seal behind the wheel of a Vauxhall Astra, you know what I mean? Lobbing Nick TVs out the side of it.
Well, this ended in a dramatic tangle outside the Wilkin and Chapman law firm, where the seal was finally wrangled. Well, in a tweet, the Humberside police announced that the seal, nicknamed Oreo, had been taken to a Skegness sanctuary by local charity. I was hoping we'd have some video footage, personally.
No, well, we don't, unfortunately. But, yeah, you imagine this seal will learn his lesson rather sharpish, you would have thought. But anyway, and, yes, so there you go. An animal pursuit chase, I suppose. That's something different. There is, of course, now a massive gear shift, naturally. New Zealand has sent a plane to Tonga to assess the damage after a huge volcanic eruption triggered a tsunami. Now, the eruption has covered, there it is, goodness me, I mean, it's terrifying footage, isn't it? It's covered the Pacific Islands in ash, cut power and severed communications.
Yes, well, luckily no deaths have been reported so far, but we, of course, will keep you updated on the situation there. We're just showing pictures at the moment of the flooding, very severe flooding, and obviously people's homes and cars have, of course, been destroyed.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, terrifying stuff. It just make you realise how helpless we are sometimes in the full face of nature, doesn't it, really? And obviously our thoughts go out to everyone over there. Well, millions of Brits are causing significant personal harm through excessive alcohol consumption. So new data from the government's Office for Health Improvement and Disparities found that 8 million people across the country are damaging their health by drinking too much.
Yes, well, some of us are drinking up to 50 units per week. And keep in mind, the NHS recommends adults consume no more than 14 units of alcohol a week. So 50 is, of course, massively over that advice. Well, let's speak to Joe Heaney, CEO of Resolve, which is a UK charity providing treatment, support and advice to anyone affected by substance abuse. Thank you for joining us this morning. This will not come as a surprise to many people. We were cooped up in our homes across lockdown and many people just simply drank more. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's one of the things that's underestimated. I mean, Britain is a nation of drinkers. We've been drinking alcohol since medieval times, and it is the one drug that's the easiest to access. It's on every street corner, it's in every shopping centre, it's in every town centre, and you can purchase it from as early as 8 o'clock in the morning to all through the night in some supermarkets. So people were at home, they were doing less. Not everyone was doing their garden, and as a result, it's not a surprise to us that alcohol consumption in the home has gone up.
No, but I think it's worth noting what 50 units of alcohol actually is, right? So apparently, look, I've just got this, it's alcoholunits.org, so fingers crossed that's spot on. But 11 cans is about 50 units. That's of normal strength lager, apparently. 5 bottles of wine, 50 units. So over the course of a week, I think loads of people will be having that much, won't they?
I think the other thing as well is, I think historically we've probably underreported. A lot of the data that has been collected actually is about sales. It's not necessarily about consumption. So the assumption is that if you're buying, 5 bottles of wine a week, then you're probably drinking them. I think you're absolutely right as well. It is the thing that, the government guidelines are about keeping people safe. And your average person that does drink, if I call it recreationally, they are probably drinking 2 or 3 times the limit that's recommended, just as a matter of course. So it's not a surprise that when you hear of 50 units, it sounds shocking. But spread over a week for most people wouldn't consider that a problem.
No.
Yeah, indeed. Downing Street, we're probably drinking many more units than that on a average lockdown week. But
for balance, Keir Starmer maybe as well.
Keir Starmer might be too. But I just wanted to ask you, do you think this is a problem that's going to get better? Because I'm looking into the future in 2022. Lots of people are going to be struggling more than ever before. We know the cost of living is skyrocketing. People's energy bills are going up massively. A lot of people don't have much to look forward to this year by way of good news. So are we just going to see this problem get worse?
I think the whole question around the consumption of alcohol is a very complicated one. But many people, the overwhelming majority of people in the Western world, drink socially. Yes, they drink above what would be regarded as safe limits, but they drink in a way that is manageable and it doesn't negatively impact on their personal circumstances, on their work, on their families, on relationships. It is a very, very small percentage of people, 2 or 3% of all people suffer addiction issues. And that's a general statistic that's regarded as fairly accurate. So I think for most people, it's about being conscious of how much you're drinking, just maybe taking a couple of days where you don't consume alcohol. When people get back to working with some kind of normality, we hope. I mean, look at me, I'm at home still working remotely. People will drink less because they'll be busier. I think for those that have addiction issues, that has always been the same question. It's how we target those people, provide them the support and give them the infrastructure around them so that they can move on and then live alcohol-free.
Yeah, well, just talk to us now, because no doubt there will be people watching this programme who are struggling at the moment, and they will potentially be struggling with where to turn as well. Things like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, can seem a bit drastic to a lot of people. I know that there are certain kind of spiritual undertones to that as well that might not always necessarily suit everybody. What are some of the other programmes other than Alcoholics Anonymous that people can go to?
I think there's a few things again there. I mean, in terms of if you want to locate addiction services, if you think that your drinking is problematic, don't talk about it as addiction. Just say, yeah, my drinking is causing me problems. I need to do something to regulate that. Then you can Google services. You'll be surprised. There are statutory services all over the country. And again, it's just about trying to find those. Resolve, we're a community drug and alcohol treatment agency, and that means that we have our own services and we're not linked directly into the health services. And also feel confident you can go to these services and it will be confidential. We don't share information unless it's a safeguarding issue with other organisations. We help people to help themselves to manage and regulate their behaviours.
Absolutely. Look, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us and to talk about such a serious issue that is no doubt affecting many, many, many millions of people up and down the country right now. Joe Heaney, CEO of Resolve, a UK charity providing treatment support and advice to anyone affected by substance abuse.
Yeah, I think, especially people of our generation, I think our generation drinks a heck of a lot. And I'm not sure many people who probably drink far too much would consider themselves as problem drinkers at all, to be honest, especially people of our generation, because it's so normalised, isn't it? Especially if you live in a big city where there's bars around every corner. It's just a very normalised thing to do every single day.
And I think if you can handle it as well, that's the other thing. I think if people are 1 pint or 2 pints, they're falling all over the place and being sick everywhere, in some ways I think that naturally limits the amount that you're drinking, right? But if you are someone who can just think, 9 pints and feel all right.
I know people who drink 10 pints and they're
feel
fine.
all right, absolutely, yes. I mean, you're looking at one of them, to be fair. But that can be a problem, can't it? Because then all of a sudden you feel like you can get away with it
Yeah,
more.
exactly. That's the thing, isn't it?
So, yes. But
let us know your thoughts. We will be going to your thoughts very shortly. But before that, we just wanted to bring you this. The manager of Aldershot Town, Mark Molesley, has given surely the greatest football interview ever. He gave the bizarre pre-match interview ahead of their FA Trophy game against Bromley on Saturday. Here it is.
If a tree falls and no one is there to hear it fall, does it make a noise? So, does a penguin get cold? What way does your bath water go? Clockwise or anti-clockwise when you take the plug out? You know, these are questions which are going to be asked of us. These are questions we've got to have the answers to. You know, we're always looking for solutions, and we've got to come up with solve the equation sometimes. But, you know, Sam's had a lovely haircut. It's started to grow out now. Coops is here, working silently away. Robbie's over there. It's the first time he's been quiet today. Terry's brought a briefcase in, you know. He's got 4 Japanese talking dogs in there. But, you know, this is what we work with, and we'll continue to work hard.
All right.
I'll have what he's having.
Yeah. Did anyone, not being funny, did anyone just check what was in his tea?
Yeah, that is classic, isn't it?
Can you imagine what his team
I
talks
just don't
about?
know how he kept a straight face saying all of that, to be honest. But,
It must have been a bet. It must have been a bet. Let us know what you think. It's got Eric Cantona when the seagulls follow the trawler vibes, hasn't it? That's a real...
Yeah, no idea. Way over my head.
Way over your head?
Yeah.
Well, you know, there you go. But yes, no, it must have been a bet, obviously. I think he was... I think from what I can gather, he was apparently trying to poke fun at the interviewer. But, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's gold, isn't it?
It's great satire, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's go to some of your views now. Philip has emailed in and said, Boris is a great cheerleader, but a terrible centre-forward. Nice little analogy there. But also now I've got an image of Boris Johnson wearing a tutu or whatever cheerleaders wear, and it's quite disturbing. So let's move on to another one.
Phil, get off our backs. We enjoy a drink as a nation. No more lectures, please. And there you go. All right, Phil, crack on that. Yes, there you go. And so there's quite a lot of that coming in, actually. People are also getting in touch, of course, about Prince Harry.
Yep.
Jennifer has called him a national irritant. Strong stuff, Jennifer. Saying the public, they want to do public appearances in the UK.
Yeah.
As nothing much is happening for them in California. Well, I'm not sure about that. Netflix might beg to differ.
God, they've got deals with Netflix, Spotify, what's it called, Apple TV, all sorts. Another Peter has emailed in saying, this business highlights the issue of breaking rules. He says it's a binary question, like pregnancy. Women are either pregnant or not, he says. So he's basically saying that you can't just say, oh, well, it was only one beer Keir Starmer had, so he wasn't really breaking the rules. He either broke the rules or not.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there we go. Right, well, keep all your thoughts coming in to us. Thank you very much, everyone. There's loads of them there. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll go to them after the break.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine, actually, for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, well, hello everybody, good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock and of course we are with you all the way through until midday. It's me, Patrick Christys. It's Mercy Muroki as well, who is back in action.
Yes, I am. I missed you.
Did you?
No.
No.
So get in touch with your views, as usual,
Yes.
views at gbnews.uk, and we'll be reading those out throughout the show. But first, let's give you today's news.
A very good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright in the GB News newsroom. Let's get you up to date. 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of investigations into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by the FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages were held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. They were all unharmed. The Prime Minister has reportedly been interviewed by Sue Gray as part of her investigation into Partygate allegations. Well, The Telegraph says Boris Johnson has shared with her what he knows as she prepares to publish her report into the number 10 coronavirus rule-breaking as soon as this week. Ms Gray is looking into several possible events, including that Bring Your Own Booze garden party in May 2020.
I don't think you can compare that in any way at all from the industrial scale, the wide culture of regularly and in a preemptive way, with invites, with trestle tables being put out, with wine fridges being stocked up, the industrial scale of partying and gatherings that we saw, that we've seen through in Downing Street, and also the cover-up and lies that we've seen subsequently.
40,000 16 and 17-year-olds in England are now able to get their COVID booster jabs. Also, clinically vulnerable 12 to 15-year-olds who are most at risk from coronavirus can also get their third injection. And a significant rule change from today for those who test positive for COVID-19 in England. The self-isolation period has now been cut from a minimum of 7 days to 5 full days, as long as people test negative on days 5 and 6. COVID restrictions on outdoor events have been lifted in Scotland, with fans now able to visit football and rugby matches. Previously, the number of people who could attend an outdoor event was limited to a maximum of 500. The tennis star Novak Djokovic could return to Australia sooner than anticipated, despite an automatic 3-year ban from entering the country. Well, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison hinted that Djokovic might be able to compete at next year's Australian Open. He says there is the opportunity to return in the right circumstances, which will be considered at the time. Well, the Australian Open gets underway today without the reigning champion following his deportation from the country. You're up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online, DAB plus radio. I'll keep you up to date throughout the day. Right now, let's go back to Patrick and Mercy.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Hello, how are you? This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. And we're here all the way through until midday. We're on your TV and on your radio, so here's what's coming up.
Yes, protesters are calling on the House of Lords to reject the police crime sentencing and courts bill, saying it will damage the right to protest. The Lords are set to take a vote on the controversial bill today. But is the bill all bad? Well, we'll discuss.
Yes, we will. Now, the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has suggested the BBC licence fee will be axed in 2 years' time. Dorries tweeted this following the announcement. This licence fee announcement will be the last. Well, what does this mean for the future of the BBC? I'll tell you what it has meant on Twitter. A load of very worried BBC employees tweeting that it only costs you 43p a day to not watch or listen to any of their content.
Well, the UK Border Force could be placed under a military chain of command as part of the government's attempt to stop boat crossings across the Channel. We'll be speaking to Alp Mehmet, a former diplomat and chairman of Migration Watch UK, to discuss these new plans.
Well, we have all of that coming up and much, much more. We've got a Twitter poll running as well, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, at GB News as well. Do you care if Prince Harry sets foot in the UK again? You can get in touch with us, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, ladies and gents, Mercy gives her views on the police crime and sentencing bill.
Thousands of activists are set to take to the streets across the country calling for the government's police crime sentencing and courts bill to be rejected by the House of Lords when the Chamber votes on it later today. Protesters have described the bill as draconian and an assault on the right to protest because under the new bill, protesters can find themselves behind bars if they hold demonstrations that cause serious disruptions to the public or for blocking streets, tying themselves to objects and for desecrating memorials. Basically, the sorts of things we've seen protesters do over the last couple of years have been a complete pain to ordinary people just trying to go about their business. Now, all the classic complaints have been thrown at the bill so far. It's being called sexist, racist, and clinical psychologists have even said the bill will supposedly destroy young people's mental health. Generally, I think that, yes, it is a robust piece of legislation. It's tough on crime, tough on criminals, and puts public order front and centre. But while social justice warriors may not like it, I think the public would actually endorse the bill. And let's not forget that this bill is not just about protest. It also includes some provisions that are completely right and in fact long overdue, like making the starting point for murdering a child a whole life order, meaning more child killers will spend the rest of their lives behind bars as they should. Offenders committing some serious crimes like sexual and violent offences will no longer be eligible for parole after serving half their sentence if this bill goes through. They'll serve 2/3 of their sentence, which is an improvement. And it introduces serious violence reduction orders, which give the police the automatic right to stop and search people who've been convicted for knife and weapons offences without any grounds for a limited time after their release. This is to crack down on habitual knife-carrying offenders and get more knives off the streets. So whilst this bill certainly has its opponents who want to see the thing scrapped altogether, I think that people who value law and order and who want to see a more robust criminal justice system should welcome the bill.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? All the criticisms of this. They're throwing sexism at it, they're throwing racism at it, they're throwing child mental health at it. Next, it'll be melting the polar ice caps, won't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, that is the logical conclusion, isn't it? The focus has been on protests, I suppose, because there are protests about the fact that people are saying it damages the right to protest and the right to expression. Actually, what it does is it gets tougher on people who cause severe disruption. It's still, quite a high... It's not saying you can never protest again, obviously. We still do live in a civil society. But it is cracking down on the sorts of very, very disruptive, very intimidating sorts of protests we saw over the last couple of years. And I think most of the public would want to see the police and the courts be given more powers to stop people doing that kind of thing or to punish them more when they do the sorts of really disruptive protests that we saw. Yes, I understand that obviously for people who want to tie themselves up to things and block roads and do that kind of thing, of course they're not going to welcome the bill. But I don't particularly feel sorry for the sorts of people who would, the eco-protests, for example, we were seeing. I don't feel sorry for them.
Well, I don't feel sorry for them. I do feel incredibly sorry for the people who had a mother sat next to them in the car having a stroke. That's one thing that happened there. People who couldn't go and see dying relatives in hospitals. People who maybe had special needs children on their way to school and who couldn't, frankly, take them to school, and that posed a massive problem. And just general stuff like that. People who maybe missed a job interview. And what do you want the Home Secretary to do? What do you want the government to do, really, in situations like that? If protests like this are becoming more and more commonplace, then surely they have to react.
Yeah, and, as I mentioned there are lots of provisions in the bill which we should all welcome. Who doesn't want tougher sentences for child killers and, sexual predators? Those kinds of things, which a lot of the bill is about, they're to be welcomed, surely, by everybody.
I think the rhetoric of this as well, kill the bill, is quite strong, because obviously the bill is another name for the old bill, the police, right? And I did find that a bit threatening. There were quite a few instances where I did wonder, really, was there a hidden message there? But anyway, Ken Hines is the chair of the Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group in Haringey in North London. He's with us now. Thank you very much, Ken. Great to have you on the show. I suppose let's just get your overall take on this piece of legislation to get us going.
Well, even though I want tougher sentences or tougher punishment for knife-carrying perpetrators, I just believe the bill is taking it somewhere else. I believe that, when we talk about stop and search, I will welcome that people who have been convicted of carrying knives and just come out of prison to be stopped and searched. I will welcome that. But what I would not welcome is innocent people going about their lawful business just being stopped and searched without any reasonable ground for the police to do just that. As for protest, I think it's very important for us as a country to be able to protest, because it's only through protest that you bring about real change. Now, again, I do understand there's been disruption and people take it somewhere else, but history has shown that when you give the police the power, they then extend that power to where it does not need to be.
But that's sort of hypothetical, isn't it? Because I suppose what this bill would be doing, especially when it comes to stop and search, is it wouldn't be targeting innocent people, would it? This provision in this bill would specifically apply to people who have already been convicted of carrying a knife or a serious weapon, and then the police would be able to stop and search them without grounds for a limited time after their release. So it's not going to affect anybody who doesn't carry a knife, is it?
Well, no disrespect to yourself, but we've heard that time and time again. But as I said, it always starts with somewhere and then it extends beyond that. If we can get the assurances that it will just be confined to those people who have been convicted and has done and habitual carriers, I would welcome that. But my concern is that I would want to see strong safeguards around that before it gets my acceptance of it.
Just when it comes to the protesting elements of it, look, I understand that if you want to affect change, you have to make your voice heard, and I understand that throughout history there have been numerous, look, I use the word radical in the looser sense, radical things done in order to get attention, from, for example, the suffragettes throwing themselves in front of the King's horse to loads of stuff, right? Loads of stuff. So I get that, right? But at the same time, if it's happening more and more regularly, we've seen what's happened with the Extinction Rebellion, we've seen what's happened with Insulate Britain. Surely, for the greater good now, the government has to step in and stop them being able to cause that much disruption.
I believe we need to have a balance, but what is that happy medium is what we are actually debating. And I think a debate is healthy. I also believe that we see what's happened with, I call it Boris Party Hard Gate that's going on, that the government says put restrictions in place, but they're not even following it themselves. But we need to have some sort of transparency. We just can't be accepting that this is going to be done for the good of us all. That's what they tell us. But my history has shown time and time again, they always take it somewhere else and mess it up for themselves.
OK, well, look, it's interesting stuff. I mean, I suppose just to return quickly just to the stop and search element of it, because that's your area of special expertise, as it were, obviously in charge of the stop and search monitoring group in Haringey in North London. Do you feel that at the core of stop and search there is a racist undertone from our police? Is that part of where you're coming from with this?
There's no... I strongly... Just to put it this way. Over the last 40 years, I've been stopped and searched over 125 times. And the prime reason is, it's called racial profiling. We've got to understand that stop and search came out of a racist law, okay, back in 1824. And it's just a continuation of it. So it's not surprising that if you're a black man, particularly, you're going to be 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than your white counterpart. But we are no more criminals than any other race. But my thing is just simply this. If we can have the police doing it in a professional way, I find people would not be so objective to stop and search. But young people, black and white, are telling us that the police are using excessive force just on an intervention inquiry.
You mentioned profiling there, and I suppose what you're getting at is, I suppose, unconscious bias, you might call it, when the police are stopping people, and you're saying they disproportionately stop black men, which they do, as the figures show. When I look at the profile of, for example, people in Young Offenders Institute, half of whom are from an ethnic minority background, when you look at the profile of people who have been killed, the vast majority, especially in London, teenagers, are from an ethnic minority background. So do you not think, actually, when the police are policing, they do need to focus on those communities? Because that seems to be, if you're a young black man, 24 times more likely to be a victim of homicide than a white man. And we're seeing these disproportionalities. So do you not think that the disproportionality in policing is coming from that, rather than some sort of racist police wanting to stop black men all the time?
Just to say simply this, you're right. We are in these figures both as victim and perpetrator. Unfortunately, the police are not very good at judging who's a victim or who's a perpetrator. All they see is the black man, and therefore heightened tension. My thing is simply about the briefing. If the briefing is that, this person is carrying a weapon, so therefore you've got to be on heightened alert. We see from the figures from stop and search that less than 3% of the stop and search is for weapons. And even then, they are not very good at finding those weapons. They talk about 400 weapons a month that they're taking off the streets. But that equates to 2 knives a week per borough. Now, my thing is simply this: as a person who's part of the group called Communities Against Violence, we are much able to stop people, to take knives off of people, and they're less likely to continue to walk with a knife. Just give an example. I work on security. On Saturday, in the place I was working, there was a massive fight, and one of the perpetrators took out a knife to go and stab the other person. I stepped in, managed to take that, to disarm him, take the knife from him, and that meant that no one got hurt. Now that person is going to be less likely now to come back into my club with a knife. So this is how we try to do in a community to help ourselves.
Good stuff. Well, look, Ken, thank you very much for giving us the time this morning. Fascinating discussion. Ken Hines is the chair of the Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group in Haringey, which is, of course, in North London. Lots of reaction to that, it's fair to say, in our views. And quite a few people, I think, echoing what you were saying, really, which is about the profiling element of it. And it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you do have a disproportionate number of people of an ethnic minority background who are unfortunately victims of this, and potentially the knife crime is taking place in areas with a high percentage of these people on the young offenders units, etc., it's difficult for the police not to profile.
Yeah, and in fact, I'd be quite concerned if I didn't see that disproportionality, because I'd be questioning, well, what intelligence are you using? Because if you are using the intelligence that the data shows, then disproportionately, you do have to focus on ethnic minority kids and ethnic minority communities. And I feel like people often see that as an attack, or there's some underlying racism to it. And, you know, maybe there is, I'm sure there is among some people, there's racism in society, in every single society. But I just think for the vast majority, police are following intelligence and actually just going off instinct sometimes. I don't want police to abandon all instinct as well, because that can save lives as well.
Well, indeed. And, you know, if there is an undercurrent, a perceived undercurrent of racism to do with it, then it really does, I think, for me, shine a light on the fact that then maybe we need more ethnic minority police officers, especially in these communities then. Why not? Why not try to do that? Try to remove that perception, anyway, of there being some kind of racial bias when it comes to stopping and searching. So that could be a way of doing it anyway, but there we go. Well, after the break, we'll be discussing Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries' proposed plans to axe the BBC licence fee. How do you feel about that? But first, it's time for your weather.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine, actually, for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Well, over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel. They're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Yes, morning everybody. It is now 11:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News, live on your TV and your radio. Now, the Culture Secretary has indicated the BBC licence fee will be axed. In a tweet, Nadine Dorries said the next announcement about the fee is set to be the last.
Yes, the yearly payment is expected to be kept at the current rate of £159 until April 2024, while Lee Anderson is the Conservative MP for Ashfield and is a fierce critic of the BBC licence fee and joins us now. Good morning, Lee. What do you make of this? And can you just explain what is this a confirmed thing from Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, or is this something that might actually be reversed?
Well, let me just confirm one thing, Mercy. I'm not just a fierce critic of the licence fee itself. I'm a critic of the BBC, which in my mind for the last few years has been the official opposition in this country. So this is heartwarming news for me and thousands of pensioners across Ashfield and Eastwood, the constituency I represent. And £2 billion they've got to find out the savings. Well, good luck with that. They might have to cut some wages there. Mr Lineker needs to be looking over his shoulder as well. I've heard he's in a fortune these days. But let's hope this is a long-term thing. Let's hope that in 3 or 4 years' time, when the charter's up, that the BBC have to finally stand on their own 2 feet like every single other broadcaster does in this country. I'm absolutely delighted with this. This is great news.
Well, I mean, obviously the BBC have come out and now almost as if they've synchronised it. Some of their big-name stars, you know, the Dan Walkers of this world, Mr Strictly, he's come out and said, well, hang on a minute, it's only 43p a day for all of these services that you get. And he's saying that's saying, surely if it's only 43p a day, then people can make their own minds up whether or not they want to pay it.
Well, listen, and people like Dan Walker need to take a journey into the real world. 43 pence a day, you know, what's that, £2 odd a week? Then, you know, for people on the breadline, for some of the pensioners in Ashfield and Eastwood, that's a considerable amount of money. You know, multiply that over a year, that's, you know, that's a quarterly bill paid out on one of the utilities, maybe. You know, these people that work for the BBC, they're on vast salaries, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. They don't live in the real world. They need to come to Ashfield. Have a walk around with me in Ashfield and talk to some of these real people in my real towns and villages about what they think of the BBC, and they'll get a completely different message than they get in that BBC bubble that they're working in.
And what do you think of the BBC? And what is your grievance with the broadcaster? Do you think then just completely unrepresentative of the views of the country as a whole? Because they are supposed to be bias is meant to be, or neutrality is meant to be what characterises the BBC, because it's a public broadcaster. So do you think that's not the case anymore?
Well, listen, Mercy, I grew up I know it's hard to believe, but I grew up in the 70s in Ashfield. And at the time, the BBC was a place of comfort. It was a TV station that we trusted. I watched, you know, programmes like Grange Hill and Blue Peter and the News Round, and you felt safe watching anti-Beeb. But it's been quite clear over the past 10, 15 years that it's not anti-Beeb anymore. It's just anti-government, anti-establishment, well, say anti-establishment, anti-conservative establishment, and they will do anything they can to have a pop at government, have a pop at Boris, have a pop at people like me. And quite frankly, you know, if people want to watch this rubbish, then let them have that choice, that personal choice, whether to pay for it or not. At the moment, people are forced to pay for a service, even though many of us, like me, I stood up in the Commons and said I weren't prepared to pay for the licence fee anymore. I've thrown it in the bin, and if they come knocking on my door, they'll get told to clear off.
Fair enough. I mean, obviously, as well, people say, hang on a minute, you know, David Attenborough's on the BBC. Peaky Blinders is banging. Yeah. Call the Midwife. A lot of people love a bit of Call the Midwife. Although, for example, I decided to switch off from the one and only time I did watch Call the Midwife when they made a veiled reference to Brexit, which last time I checked was not even anywhere near like the kind of... I don't even think the half century that Call the Midwife was set in. So I did find that quite confusing. But, you know, some people say, look at it in the round, Lee. Look at it in the round, you know.
Well, you're quite right, Patrick. I mean, there are some great programmes on the BBC. I'm not denying that. You've got Sir David, who's been great over the past 50 or 60 years. But I tell you what, you've also got on the BBC. You've got people like Lineker earning £2 million a year, when there's people in my area on the breadline having to fork out £159 a year. Give those people a choice whether or not they have to put their hand in the pocket to pay for a service that they don't watch very much.
Well, sorry.
I was going to say, do you think they're fundamentally out of touch? Because one of the things that's always struck me when it comes to BBC bias, and in my personal opinion, there is a BBC bias, is the fact that I'm not sure they always realise they're doing it. And I think there's a certain echo chamber there, there's a certain lovey-dovey element to it, there's a certain bubble. Well, and I think even when they think they're being balanced, they don't realise that there is another side out there.
Look, when you've got a publicly funded organisation that is responsible for the vast majority of sales of a newspaper like The Guardian, you have to ask yourself the question, Patrick, is this an unbiased broadcasting corporation? No, it's not. You know, nobody in their right mind would say that. It's just a left wing. They're agitators. They're in cahoots with people like at The Guardian and the Labour Party, and all they do is constantly bash government, constantly bash Boris, and they've got an agenda. You know, and the presenters that you talk about do not live in the real world. You know, come up to Ashfield, spend a bit of time with me, speak to some real people in a place like Ashfield and Eastwood, and they'll get a different message. And I challenge anybody, especially this Director General. He's saying that equality now is mission critical. Well, I've challenged him. I've looked at the Director Generals over the past 70 or 80 years. They've all been white, middle-aged men. If he's that interested in equality, step down and give it to somebody from a more diverse background.
Well, Lee Anderson, thank you for your views this morning. Very strong views there against the BBC, Conservative MP for Ashfield. See, I'm in two minds about, because, you know, as you mentioned Peaky Blinders there. I spent my isolation actually binging the all 5 series of Peaky Blinders, and I loved it. And the BBC does drama. When it comes to dramas, they really deliver, I have to say. But I completely agree with Lee there when he says that when it comes to the news aspects and some of the more cultural things, then it definitely does have that left-leaning sort of,
I am also concerned genuinely about some of the influence that it may be having on children when it comes to kind of subtle political messaging as well. I really am concerned about that. And I think now that I've got a little bit older and I watch the BBC as and when I do watch it, I can't help but notice that in most programmes there does appear to me to be at least a nod and a wink towards something, whether it's, unconscious bias, social justice, stuff like that doesn't particularly need to be there. They do also make a lot of absolute tat, like Britain's Longest Road, which I think is a 6-part series. So,
really?
Yeah, good stuff. If in case you're wondering, it's a big, long road. Also, there was that episode of Springwatch I watched where a bloke went to look for a lark in a service station undergrowth and didn't find one, which I thought was a fantastic waste of my money.
Yeah, I suppose David Attenborough really... in the absence of David Attenborough, I mean, it's hard to see what else would be worth subscribing to, other than the dramas, I suppose.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
There you go.
Now, the BBC is skint. David Attenborough there, anyway. Well, after the break, we'll be discussing the government's plans to draft the Navy in to stop illegal migration across the Channel as part of a wider drive to win back disaffected Tory voters. But before that, here's your headlines.
A very good morning. It's 11:32. I'm Rosie Wright here in the GB News newsroom. Let's get you up to date. 2 teenagers have been arrested and they're being held in Manchester as part of the investigation into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by the FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff in Saturday. The 4 hostages were held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville and were unharmed. 40,000 16 and 17-year-olds in England are now able to get their COVID booster jabs. Also, clinically vulnerable 12 to 15-year-olds who are at most risk from coronavirus are now eligible to get their booster jab. And a significant rule change for those who test positive for COVID-19 in England. From today, the self-isolation period has been cut from a minimum of 7 days to 5 full days, as long as people test negative on days 5 and 6. An 18-year-old from Bracknell has been reported missing after not returning from a night out on Saturday. Marnie Claydon was last seen leaving Attic nightclub in Windsor at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. She's approximately 5'3". She's got brown hair, a slim build. She was wearing a grey-coloured dress when she was last seen. The tennis star Novak Djokovic could return to Australia sooner than anticipated, despite an automatic 3-year ban from entering the country. The Australian Prime Minister hinted that if the circumstances were right, Djokovic might be able to compete at next year's Open. Well, the Australian Open is currently underway without the reigning champion, following the player's deportation from the country. Amazon has reversed its decision to stop accepting Visa credit cards on its website. Well, the move was meant to take effect from the 19th of January due to a dispute with Visa over payment fees. In an email to customers, the retailer said it was working closely with Visa on a potential solution. You're up to date now here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Let's go back now, though, to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning. It's just gone 11:36, and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News. And of course, we're live on TV and radio this morning. Now, in what has been dubbed Operation Red Meat, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has authorised the armed forces to assist in preventing illegal channel crossings after last year's record-breaking figures. The Ministry of Defence will be assuming control of the operation, and both the Navy and the RAF are expected to begin patrols of UK waters.
Well, joining us now in the studio is Out Mermit, chairman of Migration Watch UK, and of course, former ambassador to Iceland. I've just learnt something about you there. Ambassador to Iceland.
I was indeed, yes.
Gosh, well, there we go. Let's start what's going on in the channel first before we get stuck into that.
Let's do that.
What do you make of this then? Boris Johnson's new plans apparently to patrol the channel.
Well, one bit of me says, great, it's about time that the Prime Minister showed a little bit of interest in what's going on. So I welcome the fact that effectively more resources are going to be placed in the channel on either side of the border. That's terrific. What I'm doubtful about is that it's actually going to do very much to stop the actual flow of people, which everyone knows was over 28,000 last year. It's already double this month. Half of the month gone, and we've already had more than double. Wow. We did the whole of last year in January. So potentially we're looking at another 50, 60, 70,000 people, if not more this year. So something really has got to be done about it.
Well, sorry.
So, go on.
So I was going to say, actually, the Times are reporting this morning, it says plans are being drawn up to send migrants to countries such as Ghana and Rwanda for processing and resettlement. That's been touted before, hasn't it? But it's come up against, the people are saying they wouldn't actually be allowed to do it and it's inhumane. Is this the kind of measure you would want to see to perhaps discourage people from making that journey in the first place?
Nothing's going to discourage people so long as once they get here, they're allowed to stay. Now, you can say this is going to be another class of migration, another class of people coming into the country. The cross-channel people are going to be given a little category all of their own, and they won't be granted asylum, ever. Which is fine. What happens beyond that? They're not given asylum, but are they going to be allowed to stay here under some other category? And when people say offshore processing, send them to a third country, yeah, great. We've been calling for that. I've been calling for that for years almost. But what then? Which country is actually going to take them? If it's going to be one of our British colonies, for want of a better word, I'm afraid that they will have something to say about it. So I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
Well, absolutely. I mean, supposedly there was one point where we were going to send people to Albania. That was vetoed by the Albanian government. Supposedly there was one point where we were thinking about doing it to Gibraltar, which came as a massive shock to the people of Gibraltar. To a lesser extent as well, the Ascension Islands. I believe. I think that just shocked the penguins that are over there. But this is something that we almost presumably haven't actually spoken much to Rwanda about, and it's all very well and good as saying that we're going to do this, but we'd have to incentivise them, wouldn't we?
Well, the hint is that we're prepared to pay millions in order to do it. However, when you start sending people to Rwanda or Ghana or anywhere else and paying for it, something that the EU is actually doing, I have no problem with that if the country is prepared to accept such migrants, and indeed we end up being the ones who are actually processing them. There's no question of handing them over to Rwanda or Ghana and saying to the Rwandans, OK, you interview them, you clear them, you decide what you're going to do with them. That isn't going to happen. And it's what happens at the end of the process. Will we be able to send them back to their country? Or will we, in fact, say, OK, you can come back to the UK? Because we're most certainly not going to hang on to them in camps in any country in Africa. That's not going to happen.
And what do you make of some of your, I suppose, opponents, for want of a better word, would say, hang on a minute, these are some of the most vulnerable people. We know some of them, a chunk of them are indeed refugees because they do get granted that asylum status eventually. Sending them off to another country, it all just feels a bit inhumane. And given the fact we'd have to pay this cost anyway to resettle them or have them processed somewhere else, it just balances out eventually. I mean, is it worth the fuss?
It's most certainly worth the fuss, because if we didn't do something about it, I'm afraid they will just continue to come. Is this a sensible way of having people migrating to this country? The second point is they're not all refugees. The vast majority are able-bodied, strong, young men. 80% of them are young men, frankly.
But I think something like 50% or 60 or something do get granted, who have their asylum applications accepted. So I suppose they...
we are a soft touch. A lot of them have already been refused, frankly, in France, in Germany, in Austria, in other countries. And they end up coming to the UK by default, almost, because nowhere else will have them. So I think that it's a mistake to suggest that all of them are refugees who merit asylum.
I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah, and Sue's been in touch, actually. Boris is announcing now policies that he was voted in to do. And Sue's got a very good point there, because Boris Johnson really has not done anything like he said that he was going to do in numerous different aspects. So him just saying it now could be deemed a cynical attempt to garner public support at a time when his popularity is going through the floor.
Well, I don't know about the word cynical, not for me to say.
No.
But certainly there's been a lot of pressure from the constituencies where people, frankly, thought that this was all going to be brought under control and illegal immigration was going to stop. And suddenly it's dawned on the government that what we've been saying for a long time, that there's going to be comeback in the ballot box unless they do something about it.
Can I ask what the biggest problem for you about our current asylum system is, or our current immigration system, but just relates to the channel, right? Is it the security threat? Is it the money it's costing? Is it the numbers? Is it something else?
Yes, all those things. But the fact is that what is happening is not dissuading people from making the attempt. And that's what we've got to do, is make it clear that coming across the channel in a dinghy illegally is not going to lead to your staying in this country indefinitely. That's the message we've got to get over.
And finally, you know, we obviously this announcement or speculation perhaps about the Royal Navy being brought in, that doesn't bode well for Boris Johnson's trust, perhaps, in Priti Patel, or his confidence in Priti Patel at resolving this issue. Do you think, actually, Priti Patel's stuck between a rock and a hard place? There's not much any Home Secretary could do about this problem. What do you think of all that? Is there anybody in the government who you would trust to actually deal with this issue properly?
No, frankly, at the moment, whoever's Home Secretary, excuse me, is going to face exactly the same problems. And to be fair to Priti Patel, she has been calling for military assistance for some time now. So it's not her. The Prime Minister is an avowed mass immigrationite. He likes immigration. He, as Mayor of London, he wanted lots of immigration. So I think that having some support from that quarter is certainly going to be helpful with regard to getting together collectively the whole government to be reacting to this problem.
Now, just very quickly, I promised I was going to just ask one question about Iceland. You were a former ambassador to Iceland. What was the best thing for you about being the ambassador to Iceland?
Representing my country, representing the interests of my country, working for my country. It's also a wonderful place.
Beautiful. Stunning, isn't it?
I served there twice, actually. Once as the number 2 and the second time as ambassador.
And
It's
you
an
were one of the
extraordinarily
first
good place.
ethnic minority ambassadors as well.
I was, yes, yes. I remember coming here and not being able to speak English and being set all sorts of words to say to test me as to whether or not I could speak English. And I do remember not speaking English and not being a part of the community almost. This is why it's so important that those who come here to settle in this country, first and foremost, they've got to learn the language and they've got to accept what they're letting themselves in for. Accept the country as it is, not try and change it.
Well, there you go. I tell you what, a fantastic way to finish. Thank you very much, Alp. And a fellow Cypriot as well, from what I understand.
I am indeed, yes. Turkish Cypriot.
Well, I'm on the Greek side.
The
you
real
see, we're
thing.
getting on, so surely everything's all right. No. Right. Oh, thank you very much. Alp Everett there, of course, who fronts up Migration Watch UK, and as we've been speaking about there, has been ambassador for this country as well.
Yes, indeed. Now, the Together Declaration Group, which campaigns against vaccination passports, is demonstrating outside at number 10 Downing Street today. The organisation has previously released a petition calling on the government to reject further lockdown restrictions and attracted more than 200,000 signatures.
Yes, in fact, I believe it might be up to 300,000 now, actually. The group plans to deliver a petition with a core group of supporters, followed by a wider day of mass action on Saturday. So joining us now is Anna Breeze, founder of AgainstVaccinePassports.com and former BBC and ITV journalist. Welcome to the programme. Thank you very much. So what are you hoping to achieve with all of this, then?
Well, it's a very exciting time, I think, at the moment. The great British public have spoken, and I think as long as we stick to these very important issues of vaccine mandates and vaccine passports, we will have political support and mainstream media support. The conversations I have, I'm in a WhatsApp group with mainstream media journalists, some still working in the mainstream media, some have retired, also politicians. When it comes to vaccine mandates and vaccine passports, the great British people do not want either of them. And the Together Declaration and Alan Miller, I think this is the protest footage you're showing from outside the Senedd in Wales. We have got nearly 3,000 businesses on AgainstVaccinePassports.com, our directory, and 30 regional reps going all over the country. We've got an optician signed up the other day. We've got vets, hotels, estate agents, psychotherapists, hotels. In fact, you can go on a pub crawl in Chippenham, thanks to the AVP directory and one of our regional reps there called Mike Lees, and we are winning. We are winning. I'm working very much outside of London. Together Declaration has run an incredible campaign on Twitter. I think they've got 200,000 signatories, but if they were on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, because I do understand new media and social media very well, they would be up to millions. It's all about getting that voice out there. I don't think many people really want mandates and passports, and I think we're going to win. I really do. I think a lot of journalists at the moment are covering these stories, and I don't think they feel comfortable at all. I worked at the BBC and ITV. I've got people I talked to there, and the Anthony Worrell Thompson story. Have you seen that, where he put a sign in his pub, his restaurant, saying "We welcome all"? The BBC did a piece on that and implied that poster in his window suggested he was supporting the anti-vax movement.
Anti-vax, exactly. There's no distinction there, is there?
It's that link, isn't it? That making the anti-vaccine passport synonymous with being anti the vaccine itself. But I just did want to ask you this, because every couple of weeks we get these polls, often by YouGov, which show quite a considerable amount of support for some restrictions. I'm looking at one here, it's from December. 70% of people roughly said they wanted social distancing to remain in place.
That's terrifying, isn't it?
60% of people said having to keep 2 metre distance from those outside their household. They wanted that to remain. I'm always quite surprised at the people's inclination to actually want to keep restrictions. Is this something you dispute completely?
I'm not going to refer. No, I'm not going to refer to YouGov as an authority on this. I think they've lost a lot of trust. I interviewed a data journalist from YouGov not too long ago. I wouldn't even give them the time of day to discuss their poll, because I don't think they are on the pulse of what's happening around the country. I think we need to listen more to the grassroots uprisings such as Save Our Rights UK and Stand in the Park. The people are speaking out, and there are polls all the time on Twitter. I could run one. ITV can run one. We are seeing a change. Thanks very much to people like GBNews and Joe Rogan. And I know you've had some big guests on, Robert Malone and Mike Eden. People are waking up. And Joe Rogan did an interview, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone. Something's happening. YouGov is not something I want to speak about. I think that they've trashed their reputation. I have no trust in their publications.
So what do you think? Given there will be inevitably more variants in the future, and the government doesn't seem to have a sort of long-term strategy for how they're going to react, a blueprint for how they're going to react every time a new variant pops up. Say in a couple of months.
Inevitably, there are going to be new variants. I don't understand why you said that.
Pardon?
You said inevitably they're going to be new variants.
Yes, inevitably the virus will mutate.
Oh, probably naturally mutate.
So there will. I mean, that is epidemiologically sort of, that's the reality of it. So what do you want to happen every time there's a new variant? What if the next variant is, not as mild as Omicron was? What should we do then? What is it you would want to see every time the government does have a COVID scare? Because that will eventually happen again.
I think we've got to restore trust in democracy, and we have to put our children first. And I think the big issue we're facing now is trust. Trust in the government, trust in health, trust in education, trust in media brands. And I don't know about this situation where we're going forward. People want an end to this. It just feels like there's something's happening. Something very positive is happening from the conversations I've had with mainstream media news editors and senior journalists and politicians. There is no will or fight for. You make an important point though for vaccine mandates and passports. But what if this year there is a new virus that is a real killer? Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had such a traumatic period. We'd be like, we're not going to believe it. We're not going to trust it. I've picked up on this. There's got to be trust, because actually, what if a virus did come along and it was a serious threat to the population? We have to be able to accept and trust the media organisations and the government to act on that. I do hope it's over soon. I really do. The Together Declaration have been incredible, and big thanks to Alan Miller and his team.
Okay, all right. Well, look, thank you very, very much for coming on, Anna. And also, I think it's important, isn't it, that, there is at least one media outlet where you can come on and express your views without fear of being kind of hounded out and called some kind of deranged anti-vaxxer. And
but you've got to be really careful.
People may not agree with it.
Your last guest just said immigrants can come in, but they can't change society. And you went, that's great to end that conversation with you. I think that's awful. You guys, GBNews, you've got to be more careful about being impartial, or you're just going to be seen as activists. That last guest said you can have people come into the country, but they can't change society and culture. I think that's a very dangerous message. I think we have to always listen to people. And if we're inviting people from different cultures and society, different countries with different cultures and traditions, they have a right and a voice to be heard.
Of course, but he himself, I don't think he was getting at, the fact that immigrants have to blindly accept the country. I think he was just saying we shouldn't try that. He's an immigrant himself, by the way. He came to the country not speaking English, so I don't think he has an inherent bias against immigrants and their impact on the country because he is one himself, of course. But Anna, thanks for joining us this morning. Anna Breeze there, founder of AgainstVaccinePassports.com and former BBC and ITV journalist.
Yes, well, there we go. Indeed. Right, the poll is closed now to completion at the end of our show. Now, we were putting it up there. Would you? There we are. Would you be upset if Prince Harry never returned to the UK? And 90% of you said you would be happy to never see Prince Harry set foot in the UK again.
I would be quite upset if Prince Harry never returned to the UK, not because I particularly am fond of the man, but just because it's really tragic. I mean, he is still part of the royal family, despite how he behaves. And it would be tragic, I think, to see the family breaking down so much. I mean, it's not what the Queen needs at all. So it would be quite upsetting. And I would hope he attends you know, all the celebrations this year to mark the Queen being 70 years on the throne. I do want to see him there.
Yeah, well, he should be there, shouldn't he? And it would be a massive indication, I think, of where his head's at if we don't already know it, if he doesn't turn up. But look, I've got massive emotions about this Prince Harry stuff, and I did a monologue on it earlier on the show. You can, cheeky plug, check it out on Twitter at GBNews. But yeah, I think it's an absolute scandal. I would just finish by saying this: would you treat your grandmother that way? Probably not. So there you go.
Yes, indeed. Well, we can, I think, go to some views. Can we?
Yes, we've got.
Okay.
We've got time for just a couple. Time for just a couple anyway. Saying our Navy, for example, is not able to go into French waters, so what use would that be in the Channel? A lot of that going about. But that's it from us here today on To The Point. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Don't go away. Up next is Gloria Di Piero.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine, actually, for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be, well, -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the